As a coaster enthusiast living in the UK, I am so lucky to have so many incredible theme parks in Europe that are reasonably easy and cheap to get to. But this last summer, I didn't go to any of these and went all the way to Sandusky, Ohio for the roller coaster capital of the world, Cedar Point. While I was there, I also went to Kings Island, another amazing theme park. So today I'm going to be reviewing these parks, giving tips for if you're going and deciding whether it really is worth travelling all the way from England to Cedar Point. Cedar Point is widely known by coaster enthusiasts to have the greatest coaster collection in the world with 18 operating coasters, 5 of which are over 200 feet tall, 2 of which are over 300 feet tall. Ever since I became a coaster enthusiast in 2019, I dreamed of going here, and after years of saving money, in summer 2025, I made the trip with my mum to this world-class destination park. Getting to Cedar Point was pretty difficult as the nearest airport to the park, Cleveland, has no direct flight to or from England, so you'll have to take multiple flights. We flew to JFK Airport in New York, then flew to Cleveland. Just make sure you have enough time between flights as we almost missed ours. Then from Cleveland, you can either drive or take an Uber. Neither of us could drive, so we ended up just using Uber, which was actually way easier than we thought. We used Uber all throughout the trip and had barely any problems, but I've also heard Lyft is pretty good for getting around, but we just use Uber. It costed average $80 both ways, so it was actually a decent price. Most videos that I watched recommend that you stay at Hotel Breakers. However, this hotel is very expensive and you have to book way in advance to stay here. And from our experience, that's the case with all the on-site hotels. Also, from what I've heard from talking with people in the park, Breakers is sort of outdated and not worth the price. So instead, we decided to stay at Castaway Bay. This is one of the off-site hotels, but you still get early entry into the park, and there's even a water park which is free to enter if you're staying at the hotel. I enjoyed this water park. It's definitely more for kids, but there is a fun water coaster and a wave pool. Our room was good with a great view of the bay and all of the staff was so friendly. People always recommend Breakers, but I think Castaway is insanely underrated. Unfortunately, the biggest disadvantage is that this is not on site, so you'll have to drive or take Ubers there and back each day. It's only a 5 to 10 minute drive and Ubers costed $5 to $10 there and $10 to $20 back. Anyway, now we're done with the boring stuff, let's talk about the park and specifically its coasters. As you drive up to the park, you get an amazing view of all of the coasters, probably the best skyline of any theme park in the world with all of these towering rides. The entrance is amazing with gatekeepers' keyholes going right above the entrance. When you enter the park, the first ride you see is the carousel, but the first roller coaster you get to is Raptor, the park's B&M inverted coaster. I fully expected to not get on this ride as it was closed for almost a month prior to my visit, but luckily while I was there it reopened and I got 3 rides on it. Raptor has a fantastic layout with 6 inversions throughout over 3,700 feet of track. This is the most intense invert I've done, with the corkscrews being extremely whippy. The only problem is the headbanging. I didn't experience any on my first 2 rides, but on my 3rd ride it felt decently rough. This was on the back row, so I actually preferred my rides in the middle. I didn't get to do front, but I would imagine this is the best row. Also to the left of Raptor is Blue Streak, the park's only wooden coaster. This is the oldest roller coaster in the park at 62 years old, and we actually met a 72-year-old who rode this ride opening year and still riding it to this day. This ride has so much history, but the ride itself isn't the greatest. Unfortunately, the ride is very rough and is a very short ride. However, near the back you do get some borderline ejector airtime on the first few hills. However, I do think a good wooden coaster is what the park needs the most. I'm not sure if they have enough space, but a good GCI or Gravity Group would be a great fit. Right next to Blue Streak is the park's B&M dive coaster, Valraven. For what it is, I really enjoyed Valraven. This ride gets lots of hate for its layout and restraints, but I thought it was a really fun ride. Each of the inversions give great hang time, and of course that vertical drop is really good. You don't really notice it in the park, but this is actually a hypercoaster. At any other park, this would look massive, but since you're at Cedar Point, it doesn't seem nearly as big. Despite this, I actually prefer the drop on Oblivion, the other dive coaster I've done, but I definitely prefer Valraven overall as it actually has a layout. Also, I've never really been bothered by the vest restraints, they're comfortable and restrict headbanging. Of course, the best place to sit is the front, mostly due to the unobstructed view, and because of the shorter train, the back doesn't really give much different experience in terms of forces. Anyway, on the right half of the front of the park is the boardwalk. This is home to Max Air, a pretty large pendulum ride, Windseeker, a massive 300 plus foot tall starflyer which gives some of the best views of the park, so definitely give Windseeker a ride. This area is also home to a Ferris wheel which also gives fantastic views, and there are also many fairground rides and of course 2 roller coasters, the larger of the 2 being Gatekeeper, a B&M wing coaster. Gatekeeper is a fantastic wing coaster with many hang time filled inversions. Those near misses with the keyholes above the entrance are excellent, and this is just an unbelievably smooth ride. My favourite inversion is actually the dive loop, as it absolutely flies through that element. Also, the view from the top of the lift right next to the beach is amazing. Definitely ride on the right as you get the view and get lifted up higher on the wing over drop. Anyway, the other roller coaster in the boardwalk is Wild Mouse. This Zamperla Wild Mouse is a fun family spinning coaster, but I do think I prefer the other more standard Wild Mouse. We didn't get much spinning, and the ride is really low capacity. For a park like Cedar Point, I don't think this was the right addition, as the line moved extremely slowly. Overall, the ride was just kinda underwhelming, mostly due to the fact that it was the longest line that we waited in. Also at the front of the park is one of the two main transport rides in the park, the Sky Ride. This takes you from the front to the middle of the park. It's insane that this park is so big that the Sky Ride can only take you halfway. Anyway, let's move on to the middle of the park, which is where the majority of the park's roller coasters are located. The first coaster you will get to is Iron Dragon, the park's arrow suspended coaster. I wasn't expecting much, but Iron Dragon pleasantly surprised me. Yes, it doesn't have many forces or airtime, but it is a fun layout with a nice setting above the water, and is a really long ride with 2 lift hills. Also, I was expecting this to be a rough ride, but it really wasn't. Opposite Iron Dragon is the park's new for 2025 coaster, Siren's Curse. The first truly elite coaster we're going to talk about today, Siren's Curse is the first modern Vekoma tilt coaster to open. This ride has gone viral due to its vertical tilt track hanging riders on the first drop. This drop is so insanely cool and is unlike anything else I've experienced on a coaster. The rest of the layout also flows so insanely well. The barrel rolls and the non-inverting loop give lots of whip, and there's so many airtime filled hills, especially the triple down. Also, one thing I was not expecting is that the onboard audio adds so much to the ride. Also, this might be the smoothest roller coaster I've ever been on, not a hint of rattle or roughness, and the vest restraints are really comfortable. While I don't mind the B&M vest restraints, I do think these Vekoma ones are way better, as they are much more flexible, so allow much more airtime and hang time. Both the front and back are very different. In the front you get that crazy view of the track just ending in front of you on that tilt. However, in the back you get lifted above the lift hill on that tilt track, making the drop longer in the back, meaning you get much better airtime. Overall, I'd say the back is the best place to sit on Siren's Curse, but make sure you sit in both front and back. Very close to Siren's Curse is the B&M Flawless Coaster Rougarou. This ride gets so much unnecessary hate, but I really enjoyed Rougarou. I thought it was a fun, intense, and relatively smooth B&M Flawless coaster. Yes, it's one of the weakest B&Ms I've done, but it's a great supporting coaster that gets overshadowed by everything else in the park. Also, I've heard many say this is rough, but I never experienced any roughness. Yeah, there's a bit of a rattle, but that comes with most B&Ms, and it doesn't really affect the ride experience. Anyway, opposite Rougarou is one of the most surprising coasters of the trip, the one and only Millennium Force. This is one of the most influential coasters ever made, this being the world's first giga coaster, first coaster over 300 feet. It is massive. But over the years, Millennium Force has lost its legendary reputation. It's become quite controversial, with many people complaining about the lack of forces, with it gaining the nickname Millennium Forceless. And in my opinion, these people are wrong. This ride is absolutely incredible. This thing's speed is insane. While Top Thrill 2 is faster, Millennium feels faster. The sense of speed on this thing is unlike any other coaster. However, something that I was not expecting is that you get some great airtime on all of the hills. You get some great floater on those first few massive hills, and the last hill gives fantastic ejector. By far the best row to sit on Millennium is of course the front row. You get that insane speed with the wind in your face. Front row is the only row on Millennium Force. I think the ride's hate is really unnecessary, and I think it's a fantastic ride, especially considering it's the first of its kind. Out of the 3 giga coasters I've ridden, Millennium Force is by far my favourite. The area around the coaster is probably the most well-themed area of the park. It contains Thunder Canyon, which is a rapids ride. Unfortunately, it was closed throughout my visit, but not too big of a loss. Apart from that, there aren't any other rides in this area, but it does contain a nice petting zoo. Just don't try to open this door, the guy in there will get really annoyed. Also behind Millennium Force is the train. This takes you from the middle to the back of the park, and on the way there it gives you some amazing views of both Millennium Force and Maverick. Then on the way back you get some nice views of Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Rougarou, and these crazy skeletons, which are interesting to say the least. Anyway, let's talk about the right side of the middle of the park. The first ride you'll get to is the second tallest and third fastest coaster in the world, Top Thrill 2. To be completely honest, Top Thrill 2 is one of the only coasters of the trip that was kind of underwhelming. Let's first talk about the positives. That 420-foot backwards spike is wild. Absolutely ridiculous airtime, incredible view, and an extremely underrated head chopper. The same can also be said for the top hat, one of the greatest elements I've ever experienced on a coaster. Now the negatives. Despite being the third fastest in the world, the launches were kind of forceless. Due to the slow acceleration, the launches aren't nearly as punchy as many other slow launches I've been on. The speed is pretty crazy, but apart from that, the launches are very weak. Also, this thing has a massive rattle. I never usually complain about rattles since they don't usually affect the ride too much, but this is the worst rattle of any ride I've done. You only really feel it on the launches, but it really hurts the ride experience as you are constantly shuffling from side to side. I do think Top Thrill 2 still is a fantastic ride. It still makes my top 10, but it unfortunately didn't live up to the high expectations that it would make my top 5. Again, much like Millennium Falls, sit in the front to get the wind in your face. You do go much higher on the spike in the back and better airtime, but I prefer the front for the speed. If you keep walking along past Top Thrill 2, you will make it to the classic Arrow Looper Corkscrew. This was the first ever roller coaster to feature 3 inversions, but unfortunately the ride hasn't aged very well. Much like many Arrows, the ride has become very rough, and due to the bulky over-the-shoulder restraints, you get loads of headbanging. The one good part of the ride is this airtime hill, giving pretty violent ejector airtime, but the rest of the layout isn't great. Anyway, speaking of violent ejector airtime, very close to Corkscrew is the world's first hypercoaster, Magnum XL 200. This is the most aggressive coaster I've ever ridden. For a ride this massive, this is insanely janky. Each transition is terrible and the ride shuffles violently all throughout the ride. This thing is painful, especially during that finale. This consists of these almost triangular hills that give the strongest ejector airtime I've ever experienced. By how I've explained this ride, you probably think I didn't like it, but to be honest, this is the funniest ride I've ever ridden. If you don't like rough rides, stay away from this thing, but if you enjoy being thrown around while experiencing some of the craziest airtime in the world, then this is the ride for you. Also, if you want an even crazier experience, ride in the Magic Seat. Row 3, I can confirm, is so much better. As you walk on, you get to the next 2 coasters, Wilderness Run and Woodstock Express. These are just small kids coasters located in the kids area planet Snoopy. Wilderness Run was actually the first ever coaster built by Intamin. I didn't actually ride it as I was too tall though. However, I did ride Woodstock Express, a fun Vekoma Junior coaster. Not much to say, just a solid kids coaster. Opposite these 2 coasters is the Arrow Hybrid dueling coaster Gemini. I enjoyed Gemini. It's a fun classic Arrow coaster, not too rough, but it just has some questionable transitions. There unfortunately wasn't any airtime or really any forces in general. Also on my visit, only one side was running for the entire time. I imagine I would have enjoyed this ride much more if I had experienced it dueling. This also meant only 1 credit, oh no. It's an enjoyable ride but nothing too crazy. Next you will reach the back of the park where there are 3 more coasters. The smaller of the 3 is Cedar Creek Mine Ride. This is an Arrow mine train that is fine but doesn't really do much with its layout. This is a really long ride with 2 lift hills but it just meanders around the whole time. Luckily the ride is not rough, it's far from smooth but it's still the smoothest of the 3 Arrow mine trains I've done. Also, the setting above the water is very picturesque. You can get some great views of this ride from the train. Anyway, let's move on to the 2 main rides in Frontier Town, the first of the 2 being Maverick. This Intamin LSM launch coaster is known for ending the coaster wars. This thing is just over 100 feet tall, yet gives one of the most intense, fast-paced and aggressive experiences I've ever experienced. First off, we have the upwards launch, so much better than a normal lift hill, and was much more forceful than I was expecting. Then there's that drop, one of my favourite drops I've ever experienced. Best drop in the park. Because of that launch lift hill, you have quite a lot of speed going into this, so you just get yanked over that beyond vertical 95-degree drop, especially in the back row. Then you have these low to the ground S-bends, so intense, absolutely rips through these elements. Next you have this crazy ejector airtime hill. This might be the strongest moment of ejector airtime I've ever experienced. Such a wild moment, but then you experience the horseshoe roll. It goes through these inversions so unbelievably fast, so whippy, so intense. Then you slow down for a bit and reach the best launch in the park. Sorry Top Thrill 2. You blast out of the tunnel, dive over the water and into the 2 Stengel dives. These are some cartoonishly fast overbank turns that absolutely throw you to the side, the most whippy element I've ever experienced. You have one last great ejector airtime hill into the brakes. This ride blew me away, non-stop intensity from start to finish. The only weak part is the first couple elements after the launch. Everything else is near perfect. And for a ride this aggressive, it is so smooth. This ride in my opinion is better in the back. The airtime moments are stronger and you get thrown around more in the back. The launches are better in the front though. I'm so glad I lived up to the hype, but next we have a ride with even more hype, Steel Vengeance. If you watched my biggest bucket list coasters video, you probably know that Steel Vengeance was number 1. This ride ranks at the top of so many lists, one of 3 hyper RMC hybrids in the world, my first RMC. First, the ride has that 200 plus foot tall lift hill, then that vertical drop, absolutely amazing airtime, especially in the back. Then you have that top hat giving insane flow to airtime and laterals at the same time. Then you have one of the greatest elements ever built, that massive outer banked hill, giving again amazing flow to airtime. Then this 0G roll throws you out of your seat, quickly turns around into that 0G stall, much different from your average stall as you are travelling downwards, so you just speed through that stall. Then you travel up into the mid-course brake run halfway through the ride. This is already a top 10 coaster, and that was the weaker half of the ride. The next half consists of back-to-back-to-back strong airtime hills as you dive through the wooden structure. Hard to tell where you're going. You have two 0G rolls come out of nowhere, so much airtime and even sideways airtime until you finally hit the brakes. This has the most airtime of any roller coaster in the entire world with over 27 seconds. That is absurd. Somehow the smallest little hills like this tiny thing give you airtime. This is also one of the longest roller coasters in the world with over 5,700 feet of track and a 2-minute 30 ride experience. This ride lived up to the hype, one of the greatest coasters in the world. Sit in the back row, the airtime is ridiculous, especially on the outer bank camelback. Now that we've talked about the rides, let's talk about the park itself. First off, how long should you stay? If you want to do everything and get re-rides, I would recommend 3 to 4 days. I went during the end of August. If you're like me and can only go during the summer, this is the perfect time to go. By this time, school holidays in Ohio have ended, but it is still the school holidays in England. At this time, it is great weather, and most importantly, the queue times are relatively low for Cedar Point. From what I've heard, the queues during July and early August can get unbearable with queues up to 3 hours, but end of August they really aren't that bad with queues averaging at around 30 minutes. The price of entry can vary up to $50. We got the gold pass, however, since my visit all of the passes have changed. If you are doing more than 2 days at Cedar Point, get the silver pass. It will get you into the park for free, and you also get free parking and discounts on merch, food, hotels, and bring a friend tickets. If you are doing a big trip to lots of parks and you spend more than 5 days at Six Flags parks, I recommend getting the Prestige Pass. This will get you into any of the 40 plus Six Flags parks for free, discounts, early entry, free preferred parking, and a single-use fast lane per visit. I promise these save lots of money. Anyway, let's talk about the entrances, because there are 4 of them. Most of you probably know about the front entrance, but there's also an entrance beside Windseeker. This can be used to access the beach, but apart from that, I wouldn't really recommend using this. If you're staying on the peninsula, you get access to the Magnum entrance. This is near Magnum, Top Thrill 2, and Gemini. If you're staying on site, I would recommend using this, as you can get to Top Thrill 2 really quickly. However, I think the best entrance is the one that never really gets talked about, because I don't think many people know about this, and that is the Valraven entrance. This is near Valraven, Siren's Curse, and Millennium Force. I don't know what's open for early entrance this year, but when we went, both Siren's Curse and Millennium Force were open for early entry. Using the Valraven entrance, we were almost guaranteed first train of the day on Siren's Curse, then a walk-on Millennium Force within the first 10 minutes. There were never more than 10 people at the Valraven entrance. It is so unknown, yet so useful. Something that I forgot to mention is that I think the Valraven entrance is only available from 9 to 10, so later in the day you won't be able to enter by this entrance. Anyway, let's talk about food. There are so many places to eat, and overall, I think the food was great. I know theme park food can be expensive, but you can save so much money by getting the all-day dining pass. This costs $35, and you can eat every 30 minutes. I'd recommend one person get it and share it with the group. We got this every day, and again, it saves so much money. It also works in the water park, which we haven't talked about yet. The water park requires a separate admission ticket, but if you have the gold pass, you can get in for free. Overall, I enjoyed the water park. There aren't many amazing slides. My favourite was Point Plummet, their drop slide. This was my first time doing one of these slides, and to be honest, this is by far the scariest ride in the resort for me. But it is great fun. Just waiting for that trap door to drop is pretty terrifying. None of the other slides are too great. They have a racing slide and a few tube and body slides as well. I did really like their wave pool breakable to bay as well. They also have 2 lazy rivers, however one was closed and the other was freezing cold for some reason, and overall there were just so many slides that weren't open on my visit. I think that is just because of the time of year that I went, but it did mean that the rest of the slides had really long waits. If you have time, maybe visit the water park, but I wouldn't put it at the top of your priority list. Anyway, what do I think of this place? First, let's go over the many positives, of course the main one being the rides. I have no doubt that this has the best coaster collection of any park in the world, the only other competition maybe being Magic Mountain or Hershey Park. But even aside from the roller coasters, there are so many other experiences here. The train and Skyride are great transport rides. The Ferris wheel and Windseeker give fantastic views of the park. They also have a nice flat ride collection with Skyhawk, Max Air, Pipe Scream and Power Tower, which unfortunately we didn't get to experience as it was closed the whole time we were there. Not a massive loss, it just looks like your average drop tower. We haven't even talked about the massive beach that they have. There really is something for everyone here and such a massive variety of experiences. The next biggest positive about this place is probably the people, both guests and staff. I met so many coaster enthusiasts just like me at this place from all around the world. People from Germany, UK, Romania and all across America. I've had hit or miss experiences with staff at other parks, but here at every coaster the staff are doing their best to make the guest experience as great as possible. They would be making jokes over the microphone, hyping us up for the ride. The atmosphere at night in the Steel Vengeance Station was amazing. Everyone was just chanting Steve. As every single coaster you go on, everyone on the train claps and cheers. I have never seen anything like this at any other park I've been to, and I love it. And luckily it doesn't harm the operations because these are the fastest operations I've ever seen at any theme park. At least 2 trains on every coaster. Now the negatives. First off, I hate the locker system. Many of the rides has very strict loose article policies, so you have to put them in a locker. The only problem is that these lockers aren't free and you have to pay either $3 for a locker or $12 for an all-day movable locker. The all-day one being basically essential for all the major coasters. I don't understand why you have to pay an extra price on top of your entry, and just for a place to put your bag, $12 is expensive. I know that this is a trend with many American parks, specifically Six Flags parks, but why can't you just add that price to admission? Also, despite the operations being great, we experienced lots of ride breakdowns. Not to the extent of UK parks like Thorpe Park or Alton Towers, but they did happen quite frequently. I know the weather can be quite temperamental, but when we were there it was sunny yet many breakdowns. Most of the time the rides did open back up quickly after, but it is still annoying. Also, the last negative is the mayflies. Due to the park being on a peninsula, mayflies come out at night and swarm the park. We got a front row ride on Top Thrill 2 and got absolutely covered in bugs. The toilets were just full of people washing bugs off their face. It was funny but also kinda disgusting. They should really provide goggles at night for people in the front, like what they do with Red Force or Ferrariland. When I was there, we had to wear goggles in the front, and I really think they should add that to Top Thrill too. And I've heard bugs are bad on Millennium Force as well. Luckily on other rows you don't really get bugs, it's only really in the front. So overall, do I recommend going all the way to Sandusky from the UK to go to the coaster capital of the world? Absolutely, this is a must-do for any enthusiast. The positives far outweigh the negatives, and this is my favourite park I've been to. I know this isn't everyone's favourite park. I've been to Phantasialand and many put that above Cedar Point, but as someone who doesn't really care about theming and lives for coasters, this is the perfect place for me. Go during late August, get the Gold Pass, I promise you will have an amazing time. Next we are going to be talking about the other park I went to, Kings Island. This place has an amazing coaster collection. Don't expect it to rival Cedar Point or anything, but this place has some fantastic rides. First, let's talk about hotels. Kings Island doesn't own any hotels, so there isn't any early entry like at Cedar Point. There is a Great Wolf Lodge nearby, however we went with the cheaper option, the Suburban Studios. This offers free breakfast, a heated pool and most importantly a free shuttle to Kings Island each day. I enjoyed this hotel, I would definitely recommend. Anyway, let's just get to the park itself. As you enter the park you get an amazing view of the fountains and a replica of the Eiffel Tower. Bit random but pretty cool. You can go up the Eiffel Tower to get some views of the park, but we didn't have time to go up. To your left is Action Zone, home to quite a few thrilling rides. First off we have the B&M inverted coaster Banshee. This is an extremely unique inverted coaster. It is the only inverted coaster to have the vest restraints. Most people don't like them, but I don't really mind. Yes, it restricts airtime, but it also restricts any headbanging. Also, Banshee has an incredibly unique layout, with the elements being much more spread out than your average invert. The ride features one of 2 pretzel knots ever built and a really slow inline twist, both being my 2 favourite elements of an inverted coaster. While this ride has a polarising reputation, I really enjoyed it, and in my opinion, Banshee is my favourite B&M inverted coaster. Ride in the back to get pulled over the elements much more. Also in this area we have the drop tower with the extremely unique name Drop Tower. This is an Intamin gyro drop and I really enjoyed it. A forceful giga-sized drop. There's also a pendulum ride called Delirium. Didn't do it but is a similar size to Max Air at Cedar Point. Another ride in this area is unfortunately the biggest loss of the trip. Invertigo was closed the whole time we were there. This is a really rare Vekoma Invertigo model. I've heard it isn't the smoothest ride ever and one of if not the weakest thrill coaster in the park. So I'm not too mad because at least I got to ride the third coaster in this area that is below the track, the Bats. Much like Iron Dragon, this is an arrow suspended coaster. It is a long walk to get here but this ride is amazing. One of my favourite family coasters I've ridden. This ride absolutely rips for its layout, which is in the middle of the woods, so you are surrounded by trees. The ride is much shorter than Iron Dragon, but I think the more thrilling layout more than makes up for it. The layout makes the most of the swinging vehicles, and the ride is super smooth considering it's an arrow. The one ride I got on it was at night, making the experience so much better. Anyway, sticking to the left side of the park, we have the Arrow Mine Train Adventure Express. Many people say that this is their favourite mine train, and I can definitely see why. It has a nice layout with some surprisingly really good theming, best theming of any coaster on the trip. However, unfortunately, out of the 3 arrow mine trains I've done, this is by far the roughest. This ride throws you around with these awful arrow transitions and it gets really painful. This ride has so much potential, but my one ride that I got just wasn't enjoyable. Anyway, a more enjoyable ride very close to Adventure Express is the Racer. Racer is a classic PTC racing coaster and is actually the oldest coaster in the park. Despite this, the ride is running unbelievably smooth for its age. This ride actually gave some decent airtime on most of the hills and was overall just so much fun. Unfortunately, much like Gemini, the ride was not dueling when I rode it. The other side did open later in the day, but I didn't have time to ride it. Still, a great wooden coaster, really exceeded expectations. Next we are entering Area 72, home to 2 roller coasters, the smaller of the 2 being Flight of Fear. I'm going to be honest, this ride disappointed me. This did not ride well. The transitions were rough, and in terms of the layout, it's pretty thoughtless. The launch was great, the rest of the ride was just uncomfortable. I'm so glad that this has lap bars, otherwise this would not be good in the slightest. However, I do need to give credit to the great theming in the queue and station. None during the ride, but that's okay. I just wish this ride tracked smoother. Anyway, the other ride in this area is so much smoother, and that is the B&M Giga Orion. I have mixed opinions about Orion, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't underwhelmed. First off, let's start off with a positive. I was shocked with how smooth this ran. For a ride this massive, there wasn't a hint of rattle, and is up there with Siren's Curse to be the smoothest coaster I've ever ridden. Now let's just get into why I was underwhelmed, the main one being the forces. For a massive B&M Giga coaster, I expected loads of intensity and airtime, and I didn't really get much. There was only one really good airtime moment, that being the speed hill, but the rest of the ride under-delivered in the airtime department. Unfortunately, most of the ride spends a lot of the time high up in the air, but as a result, you don't really feel the high speed as much as a ride like Millennium Force. And unfortunately, the ride is quite short with only 50 seconds of prime ride time. All of this leads to me being underwhelmed. It's not a bad ride by any means, I would still say it's a great ride, but it is nowhere near the level of Millennium Force for me. It might just be because of the day I rode it, maybe the trims were hitting harder than usual, I don't know. Where should you sit? Well, I didn't get a back row ride, but from what I've heard, that is the best row to sit on Orion. Anywhere near Orion is the 300 plus foot tall Windseeker. I didn't do this, but I imagine you would get some great views from up there. Also near Windseeker is the premier family launch coaster Queen City Stunt Coaster. I think the layout on this ride is great. It has some great lows to the ground moments, a punchy launch, and an intense upward helix. Also the theming is nice, but some of the effects didn't work when I was on it, and I've heard this is pretty common. But the main con of this ride is the same as Flight of Fear, the other premier coaster, and that is that this ride does not run well. The ride just wasn't comfortable, and the transitions just weren't great. The ride has potential, but it did disappoint me. Now let's move on to the right side of the park. At the front is the park's main kids area, which has won awards for being one of the best kids areas of any theme park, and I can definitely see why. This place is massive with so many rides, including 4 roller coasters. One of these is the Great Pumpkin Coaster, a ride that I didn't have time to do, but it is a tiny ride though. Only ride this for the credit. A better kids coaster in this area is the wooden roller coaster Woodstock Express. I really enjoyed this. I think it's a great kids coaster. Like all the woodies here, this ride runs great. Not much to say, it's just solid. Next we have the Vekoma Hang and Bang Woodstock's Air Rail. I had low expectations for this ride, and while it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, it's still not a great coaster, especially for kids. If you didn't know, these have a bad reputation for being really rough rides and delivering lots of headbanging. And yeah, the restraints are very bulky and give lots of headbanging potential. I honestly think if they replaced the restraints, the ride would be much better. The ride still doesn't run great on the track, but with a lap bar, all headbanging would be eliminated. The final of the 4 coasters in this area is Snoopy's Soapbox Races, a Vekoma family boomerang. This is the first family boomerang I've ridden, and it did not disappoint. I think these are perfect kids coasters. They're smooth, compact, and of course go forwards and backwards. They're enjoyable to everyone. They are popping up all around the world, and I am all for it. In terms of other notable rides in this area, there is a small log flume called Charlie Brown's Rushing River Log Ride, but I didn't ride it. It looks decent, don't prioritise it, but if I had more time I would have liked to do it. The other ride in this area was Boo Blasters. I say was because it has closed since my visit, and because a few days before my visit its closure was announced, the ride has a massive queue the whole day. And since I'm not really dark ride enthusiast, I did skip it. It looked like a great ride and is getting replaced with Phantom Theatre later this year. I'm excited to see how that turns out. As we exit the kids area, we are met with the B&M Hypercoaster Diamondback. This is a great, really long hypercoaster with lots of airtime. It has a fantastic layout, really smooth, and a great splashdown. The airtime isn't nearly as strong as the other B&M hypercoaster I've done, Shambhala, but I wouldn't really compare the two, though from what I've heard, Diamondback is considered a mid-tier hypercoaster. But I was impressed with Diamondback. I thoroughly enjoyed it and every hill hit. The back is definitely the best row for the flow to airtime, and you get a little wet on the splashdown. However, in my opinion, an even better coaster very close to Diamondback is the amazing wooden coaster Mystic Timbers. I absolutely love Mystic Timbers, an incredible GCI woody. I actually expected this to be a more airtime focused experience, however it was more about the insanely fast pacing that this ride has, which I do not mind at all. While you're only going a top speed of 53 miles per hour, this ride feels so fast and it goes extremely low to the ground, out and back into the woods. It is a great experience and is the perfect smoothness for a wooden coaster. Now, of course, I can't talk about Mystic Timbers without mentioning the shed. It just has a screen and some nice theming, but yeah, I love this ride. Sit in the back for the more chaotic experience. Anyway, now right in the very back of the park, we have two rides. First is the Whitewater Canyon, a rapids ride. I made the stupid mistake of riding this as my last ride right before I had to go and catch a flight back to England. Big mistake, so I was soaking wet for the rest of the journey. This is the wettest rapid rides I've ever ridden. It's fun, but don't ride this on a cold day or when you're about to leave. Anyway, the final coaster left to review at Kings Island is one of the most ambitious coasters ever built, the Beast. This is the world's longest wooden coaster at an insane 7,361 feet of track. To say that this ride exceeded expectations would be an understatement. Probably the most surprising coaster I've been on, and what I thought would be a good but not great ride is now one of my favourite coasters I've been on. Let's go through the 5-minute ride experience. First off the ride you go really deep into the woods. You can't really see the park from the Beast in most areas, so you feel like you're just in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Much like Mystic Timbers, you really feel like you're flying through the woods, when in reality you aren't going that fast. Then the second half of this ride consists of this massive helix. You have this long ramp leading into an insanely intense 540-degree helix, one of my favourite elements I've ever experienced. In my opinion, the way this ride runs is perfect. It isn't painfully rough, but it also isn't glass smooth. The train certainly shakes, which also kinda adds to the fun of it. Flying through the woods in an almost janky feeling train makes this one of the most pure fun coasters I've ridden. But as you all know, the best way to experience the Beast is the night rides. The Beast is infamous for delivering one of the greatest night rides in the world, and the Beast night ride might be my favourite coaster experience I've had. Flying through the middle of the woods in the pitch black darkness is such a wild experience. I know this ride doesn't have airtime or many forces, but this is one of the funniest and most enjoyable coasters I've done, and it's unlike anything I've done before. In terms of places to sit, it doesn't make much difference. I guess the back because you get thrown around, but really any road is good. So as you've seen, Kings Island has a fantastic coaster lineup. Not to the scale of Cedar Point, but it's definitely a must-do if you're a coaster enthusiast. I still think they need a standout coaster. My favourite is the Beast, but I like the Beast much more than most people. I think Siren's Curse should have gone to Kings Island instead of Cedar Point. So what coasters would Kings Island benefit from? Another wooden coaster? No, I think a multi-launch coaster from Intamin or Mack would be great, especially an extreme spinner. That would be perfect fit in their lineup. Now, like Cedar Point, all of the staff and visitors are great. People clapping after their rides, great operations. I think Cedar Point does it better, but it's still nice to see. Also, the atmosphere at Kings Island is much different. It's much more chill and calm atmosphere compared to Cedar Point's more exciting and thrilling atmosphere. I think I prefer Cedar Point's atmosphere, but I do think a lot of people prefer the more laid-back atmosphere of Kings Island, which I think is why some people prefer Kings Island overall. I personally prefer Cedar Point, mostly because of the coaster collection, but something Kings Island does better than Cedar Point is the theming. Lots of Kings Island's rides have a lot of effort put into the theming. Of course, not to the scale of most European parks, but I was not expecting it. There is a water park. I didn't have time to go there, but from what I've seen, it looks better than Cedar Point Shores, so if you have time, maybe check out the water park. I also didn't eat anything here. They do have the all-day dining plan like at Cedar Point, so I would recommend getting that. I've heard the food here is very good. Also, unfortunately, some rides do require lockers. Not as many as Cedar Point, which is good, but still annoying. They should just make lockers free. Now, if you are travelling at the same time that I did at the end of August, don't make the same mistake we did. At the end of August, the park is only open on weekends and from 5 to 10 on Friday. I realised this after we booked the holiday, so this meant I only had 2 half days. I still got to do most of the rides I wanted to do, but it meant I did miss out on some rides. Just look at what days the park is open before you book. At Cedar Point, we experienced quite a few ride breakdowns. Here at Kings Island, there were none. Operations are fantastic, and I think the way the park is run as a whole is great. Now, would I recommend travelling all the way from the UK to Kings Island? Yes. I do think the coaster collections of some other parks like Canada's Wonderland do look better, but from what I've heard, overall Kings Island is run better than most other parks. Of course, make Cedar Point the main priority, but Kings Island is a fantastic park, and I will certainly be back one day. So we are finally at the end of the longest video yet. I absolutely loved my fast trip to America, and I'll definitely be back in the future. I'll hopefully be able to drive by the end of this year, so I'll be able to go to more UK parks. And I will be going on a trip to one of the best parks in Europe. But yeah, thanks for watching and goodbye.